Good morning.
Hi.
Hello, Jim.
Hi.
Nice to see you again.
As well.
Marjorie.
Hi.
Thank you for coming in this morning. As you know, we completed an assessment on Noah a couple weeks ago.
You call me Noah.
Jim. We completed an assessment on Jim a couple weeks ago. Just to look at his overall achievement in the areas of reading, writing, math, and some oral language. You have a very kind, polite young man. He's very personable. When he came in for the testing, we had just a little chat beforehand, and he's a very good communicator. He seemed quite confident and calm and relaxed through the testing. And I think he tried his best. He appeared very focused throughout the assessment and seemed okay at the end. Nothing came out or big frustrations that were evident.
Good.
So, and as you'll see in the results, he has a lot of strengths, especially in the area of math. I don't know if that's somewhere that you feel a little bit confident, but he does very well with a lot of the math. So before I start, I'm just going to go over some of the language that's used in here. When I do the assessment, they're called raw scores. So when I add up all the answers that he's done, and it sort of gives you a raw score like you would get on a regular test. And then the specific assessment that I use, the why, it will take those raw scores and recalculate them into what we call standard scores. And so they're based on sort of a bell curve, and so that we can see when we'll be looking at the numbers that there's sort of some ranges here. So what you'd see in the middle here, everything's calculated sort of so that it fits within a mean of 100. And so anything that is between, you can see it in here, so here's your mean in the middle. And so what you consider sort of average, normal range would be here within this zone in the scores. And then as we get lower one way, obviously it's just saying that there might be some deficits there, or there's some struggles with that area. And again, on the other hand, is some strengths. So when we look at the tests, we'll be looking at percentages. It will give us, first of all, we'll look at a confidence interval, and that number is a range, and it's just the range that's showing you on this bell curve where his score fits. And then the percentile rank. So again, this is 100. So if he ranks 75, it's just saying that 25% of students his age, peers, would score higher on that, and then the 74 would score lower. So you can kind of have an idea of where his results would fit in terms of sort of peers his age. The test results will also give us grade equivalence and age equivalence. Again, the ranges that they give us, the age equivalent is maybe a little bit more accurate, just because people start, the grades aren't necessarily, students can be based on their age, they can be in the different grades, but the age equivalent is fairly accurate to read. So as we go through the assessment, if you have any questions, please stop me along the way as you're thinking of it, and let me know. Okay, so you have the report in front of you, and I'm just going to go through it, and we'll see how he does. Are there any questions before I start?
Not yet.
No? Okay. So as I mentioned, when Jim came in, he was very relaxed. He was easy to talk to. Some of the tests allow you to use paper and pencil, so he did so. He seemed to take his time and calculate those questions. He appeared to take his time processing the questions before commencing any written problem-solving work. He didn't appear to become frustrated at any point during the testing, and he was calm and focused throughout. I did notice that when he completed the most of the questions I will read, but he also has them in an easel so that he's reading them as I'm saying them. But for the listening component, it's strictly oral, there's no visual. So I did notice that he closed his eyes for some of this section, so we'll maybe talk about that when we get to those scores. So if you can see on the very first page there, it has the subtest score summary, and that sort of just condenses everything. So across the board, you can see that Noah does very well when we have age equivalencies. So that this assessment basically is used on individuals from 4 years up to 19, 11 months. So if you can see on the age equivalent column, if it says greater than 19, 11 months, it just means that he has scored at the top of this test. So obviously those are strengths for him, which you can see are a lot around the math, sentence composition, reading comprehension. That one was a little bit lower, listening comprehension, and the word reading. So again, we'll get to those in a little bit more detail as we go through this. So for the oral language, there's different subtests for this one. So there's the receptive vocabulary, which measures listening vocabulary. Jim's asked to point to a picture that best illustrates the meaning of the word that he hears. And in the oral discourse comprehension, this measures his ability to make inferences about and remember details from oral sentences and discourse. So here, Jim is asked to listen to sentences and passages orally, respond to the comprehension questions. His score on this was 53 percentile for listening comprehension, indicating that 47% of his peers are able to listen to vocabulary words, understand their meaning, and make inferences about what they've heard better than him. So this area I might compare to all the other ones that we look at. This is one area that I sort of stood out for me in terms of his listening comprehension. The oral expression subtest contains expressive vocabulary, oral word fluency, and sentence repetition. And these are designed to measure his skills and competencies that are important for effective oral expression. Tasks require Jim to say the word that best corresponds to a given picture and definition, name as many things as possible belonging to a given category within 60 seconds. So I think his was animals on the assessment. Did you have to name as many animals? And the other one was
colors.
Colors, right. So it's just sort of spontaneous on the moment. You have 60 seconds, go kind of thing. Again here, his percentile rank was 43%, puts him below the 50% mark for performance. So again, it's just maybe something that we want to monitor a little bit here. So during the test, Jim attempted to listen to the information relayed orally. When the sentences were short, he was often successful in remembering the information presented and answering simple questions related to what he heard. However, when the orally delivered passages were longer, indicated a sequence of events, used more advanced vocabulary, or asked him why, he had a little bit more difficulty in coming up with the answers. So as I mentioned earlier, I noticed that when we were completing those assessments, Jim, you had your eyes closed. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit about, do you know why you do that or what?
Yeah, it's more of just so I can see the words as I'm listening to them and trying to read them in my head instead of just being able to hear them.
Okay, good to know. So again, there, the visual, like I said, these are some assessments or the subtests that he doesn't have the ability to read it and listen at the same time. Okay. Do you notice anything at home that when it comes to hearing or listening, anything that's sort of stuck out for you?
I was just assuming that's typical child or teenager behavior,
right.
The selective hearing. So, I might have to ask him to do things several times. But noticing that he he might be able to better understand me or do things more quickly if we're closer in proximity. So if we're in the same room and I've asked him to do it, I don't find I have to repeat as often as, let's say, if I'm calling upstairs and asking him to do something.
Have you had his hearing tested at all?
Not since the assessment's done in kindergarten.
Okay. So that might be something that you want to consider,
Okay.
just to rule that out. The scores aren't extremely low, but definitely something, if that's an underlying issue, then it would
Okay.
definitely be something to look at now.
Okay.
So, sounds good. Any questions? We can continue. Good. Good. Okay. So for reading, there's 4 subtests that are administered to assess Jim's strengths and challenges in reading and language skills. I won't read every single word in here for you. You can have a copy of the report to read. But if you just scroll down to the chart at the bottom, basically it's showing that all of Jim's scores in reading, word reading, oral fluency, they're average. So he's fitting in with his age group, and he's doing well with those. So is there anything that you find, Jim, at school when you're doing?
Well,
Like-
English isn't my best class, so that seems about right.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Again, he did well. I'm just on the essay composition. He did well. They're given, I think, 10 minutes they have to write, and they need to they're given the topic, they need to create a plan and fulfill the requirements in the 10 minutes. So he did a really good job of stating his topic, backing it up with 3 different reasons with detail. The only thing I noticed is some of the, just the form of it, I think, is where, in terms of breaking up the paragraphs, but again, hopefully that will come with more practice in school, but very well written. So finally we get to math, and here we can see some obvious strengths for Jim. And here it didn't seem to matter if it was oral. He seemed to do better on these scores than on the listening to sentences, and perhaps because he has a math brain, or he's easier to visualize a math problem with numbers than he is with words. So here there was 3 tests. He had to do math problem solving, numerical operations, and again, when he needed to use paper and pencil, he did, and he took his time. I think he even noticed a couple errors that he went back and fixed before he was finished. And the final, the math fluency, here there's 3 different tests that are administered. You have 60 seconds to complete addition, subtraction, and multiplication. And he finished all of the questions within that 60-second time limit, and accurately. So does very well with that. So at the bottom you'll find some recommendations I've made. These basically go with the oral language and the listening, where his scores are a little bit lower. So in terms of instruction, I will share these results with his teachers, specifically his English teacher, where I think there's the most having to listen without the support of visuals. So I would recommend that the teacher provide extra time for processing his information, and to pair oral instructions with visual ones, whether like symbols or in writing. He did better when he could read along with what I was saying. Develop a queuing system for Jim to focus on, so that he knows he needs to listen now. As you said, when you're talking to him, he's more apt to follow through with the instructions. So just something the teacher can do very subtly to let him know that, just give me your undivided attention for this. Pre-teach new vocabulary. Frequently check in with the student for understanding. Use repetition frequently and ask the student to repeat information back in his own words. So I understand some of these are you know, you might, in high school, some of them will be easier to accomplish, but I think also it will be for you to initiate that question if you find that you're not sure what you've been asked to do. Just maybe take a little bit of proactive to ensure you know what was asked of you. Provide copies of notes for you so that you have them and you're not having to try to write and listen. You can read them as the teacher's saying them. And then again, I just consider referral to a speech and language pathologist. So again, if you do end up having a hearing test done and everything looks great, then we may want to just look a little bit deeper into any underlying issues with oral processing. So in terms of environment, I would suggest reducing auditory distraction in the classroom. It can be easier said than done. I'm not sure if you're allowed to use headphones that you can just plug in and have no noise or just some white noise in the background, not music, but just sort of to help block out any distractions in the classroom. Use preferential seating, so if you can try to be a little bit closer to the front, somewhere that you can visually see the teacher. And if the teacher is willing to use the FM system, I know some classrooms are set up, so it just makes it a little bit louder, easier for you to hear and focus. In terms of assessment, I'd recommend that the teacher just checks in to make sure you know and understand what your assignment is. Allow you to have the written instructions. If something's delivered orally, that you also get a copy of it in writing. Give you some choice in how you maybe want to complete the assignments or activities, and then provide, as I said, some vocabulary or whatever's in print that can support you with some of that oral learning. Okay. Does anything stand out here as surprising? Any questions from what we've gone over? No? Okay, so from here, I would suggest a hearing test, just to rule that out again, as I said. And once you get those results, if we can maybe touch base again, and I'll pass this on to the teachers and give it a few weeks to a month to see if anything has changed, if you're finding more success, if your assignments, you're feeling more successful with them.
So is this document going to all of the teachers? Do I need to take it to the teachers and talk to them about it and have to advocate for him, or is
Nope,
it?
that's my job.
Okay.
That's my job. I will communicate this to all of them and check in to see, both with Jim and the teachers, to see what classes that these are happening in, and to make sure that we're moving forward with him. So just if anything comes up, or Jim, if you think of anything, you can tell your mom, you can talk to me at the school, just make sure that we're keeping on top of everything. Okay. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.